So I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker. It will be Gojko. Gojko is impossible to categorize. He's an author, a founder, a consultant, an advocate, a champion. He's known all over the world for his perspectives on software engineering. He's won awards. He's written so many books we couldn't list them all. He's been in our keynote list since at least 2021, and to finally have him here, we're absolutely thrilled. Thank you, Gojko.
Thank you. What I really want to talk about is how, as our industry changes, we respond to that change. And about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I've read this kind of book by Kent Beck called XP Explained, and it blew my mind. And basically, it told me that developers are going to rule the world, and as a developer, I can ignore testers and business analysts and everybody else. And it was wonderful. It was preaching to the choir. But one of the things that actually started happening back then is kind of the way I understood it is there was a team of people that were delivering stuff, and there was kind of the XP customer on the other side. All the other divisions are irrelevant. And it was up to us to figure out how we deliver what we need to deliver to the customer. So, and that led to lots of really, really interesting changes over time. The original 4 principles that people put out when they did the manifesto are, nobody really remembers the other part, but it's responding to change over, I don't know, responding to immutability or something like that. And then there's kind of individuals over drones and things like that. But the 2 key things were basically, let's talk to the customers and let's respond to change. And on a meta level, that's been happening very, very slowly over the 25-year period where we are responding to the change of the industry itself. There's a UX design rule by Bruce Tonazzini that basically says that when you give people a tool, they can solve a task that was challenging to them in a better way. And what they do then is they take on a more complicated task. So it's called Tonazzini's law of commute, which basically says that the time of a commute is fixed, the distance is variable. So we as a software development industry now have better tools, so we're taking on more complicated and more challenging tasks in the same amount of time. And at the same time, kind of when we started looking at this kind of responding to change and working directly with customers, one of the first things that kind of fell out were this idea that kind of somebody can predict what's going to happen and what's going to be correct 2 years from now. When I started making money with kind of programming software, it was usual to be on a 2-year project. 6-month projects were kind of short. And people were pretending that what's going to come out in 2 years is predictable. And that's one of the first things we stopped doing as an industry. And then after that, basically what started happening is short iterations, shorter and shorter iterations. I remember when we started kind of doing Scrum, whatever that meant back then, the iterations were 2 months long. But then most people today do like a week or 2 weeks or even releasing multiple times a day. So as that thing became shorter, people in our industry started coming up with tools to make that work. The original XP book talks about continuous integration, but it talks about continuous integration as one person sitting at a machine that's designed to be the integration machine, integrating their code, then another person comes, integrates that code. We no longer do that. We have better tools, we have better practices. And then, I said on a meta level, that's caused some interesting shifts. So for example, the faster we integrate, the more we need to test. So we've developed a bunch of testing tools, we've developed a bunch of testing practices. Then these things started opening up some really, really interesting meta ideas. I remember about 11 years ago, we were working with an insurance company, and what these people realized is that their testers have actually really good opinions about the product. Because their testers have kind of had to develop insights to be able to test the product, but then they can become kind of product-oriented as well. And these people actually, when they lost the head of product, they promoted the head of testing to be the head of product. It's totally insane. So we're getting this kind of mix of roles now. And we're doing better testing, we are kind of doing things faster, and then all of a sudden kind of we get this mix of continuous integration moving into kind of continuous delivery, again influencing products. And then people figured out, well, we can combine these two and then we can have A/B testing in production. And kind of all of a sudden development tools are influencing how we do product delivery and things like that. So lizard optimization is, I think, something that is as a trend coming over the next 5 to 10 years to most people. And I think it's kind of a mix of kind of what we now do with cloud deployments and observability, the tools we had to deliver for that, mixing that with product management in a very similar way to this. And it's a brilliant way how I think developers and testers can influence more what's kind of going to happen with the product. That's what I want to inspire you to think about today. Now, going back to kind of these 4 principles that we talked about for the last 25 years, one of the things that's remained constant, one of the things that kind of we have not changed as an industry, so we're not responding to that change, its immutability, is this idea of, oh, there's an XP customer, or there's a product owner. And then, because there's a product owner or there's an XP customer, then people put layers and layers and layers of indirection there. And then you have these brilliant processes done by Deloitte or Accenture that look like a London Tube train map where it's like 700 nodes of distance between a developer and somebody who actually uses the software. Let's not do that. So one of the kind of really inspiring stories I've read about this comes from a company in China called Haier. They're not really known in Europe because in Europe they are competing under different brands. But their story is described incredibly well in a book called The Startup Factory by Joost Minnaar. And I strongly recommend people read this book. Now, in the book, they have this principle of zero distance to customer. Now, between the author of this principle being Chinese, the author of the book being Dutch, and me being Serbian, there's some article missing there. This grammatically sounds really wrong, but I don't know what it is. You'll have to figure that out. So what they try to do is basically push all the decision-making directly to the level of the people who are in direct touch with the actual customer, not the customer representative, not the proxy of a customer representative, not the owner of the proxy of an area of a customer representative, but the actual people talking to the people buying stuff or using stuff. And one of the most inspiring stories in the book is when they started noticing a surge in broken washing machines in a particular rural region of China, which is bizarre. As a statistic, it's bizarre. You have kind of this specific washing machine being returned to the service centers much, much more frequently than all the other machines and than anywhere else in this specific region. So the first thing they thought about is there's kind of some distribution fault. While you're transporting the machines to this rural region, there's a problem. They tried to kind of solve that. They couldn't figure out anything wrong with it. Then they thought, well, there's some kind of production problem for a factory that's supplying this specific rural region. Nope, nothing there. And then they got people in the service centers to actually try to talk to people who are returning the machines and see what's going on. And it took a bit of kind of persuading, but then one person admitted that instead of washing their clothes, they washed the potatoes before kind of going to the market. And I said, well, why? I said, well, you know, you wash the potatoes, they kind of absorb a bit of water so they're heavier, you can sell them for more money. Plus, they look nicer. So, you know, people notice them in the market. And apparently, one farmer in this rural region figured out that the lowest kind of power program on this machine doesn't damage the potatoes that much. I don't know why. Like, let's not go into that. There's a whole story behind that we don't know, but one person figured it out, that person talked to their friend, that person talked to their friend, that person talked to their friend, and all of a sudden you have these kind of thousands of farmers washing potatoes in this specific washing machine in this specific region where the machine is getting broken after a couple of washing cycles, and they're returning it. So what the Haier people did at this point is when they figured that out, a couple of months later there was a special machine for washing potatoes on the market. and made a killing. And these people are one of the biggest brands in the world for kind of washing appliances because they're so quick figuring out what the customers need and iterating on that. And they're allowed, they're empowered to make these decisions. So now that kind of goes back to the other two principles, where what does working mean in this case? If somebody's using your machine for washing clothes to wash potatoes and it's getting broken, is that working? Under what definition? And I don't know. And when you look at kind of individuals and interactions, what happens when we remove the proxy and the proxy to a proxy and the proxy to a proxy to a proxy, then all of a sudden there's like millions of these people and the interactions are really crazy. That's the reason why all these proxies were introduced in the first place. To kind of filter out all the noise and to help a team actually deliver something that makes sense. Now, as an industry, I think we're moving in the direction where higher is. Maybe it's not going to be zero distance to customer for everybody, but we are reducing these layers strategically. And this is something that kind of now we need to figure out how do we do this on a meta level differently. And I've not been speaking at many conferences last couple of years because I've been living under a rock building my own products. One of the products I built is reasonably popular. We had about 10 million active users last year. With 10 million active users, a certain percentage of people should not be allowed to use a keyboard, really. And this is my life now. Basically, I'm responding to emails like this all day long. This is an email I got a couple of weeks ago. I have no idea what it says. But what I can tell you is that this URL is completely invalid because it starts with a slash. And I know for a fact, because I built the website, that this web page does not exist. So this person is complaining in Arabic about a web page that doesn't exist. And when I translated this, and I can even tell you what it is now without translating it because I get like a dozen emails like this a week. What this person's done is they went on ChatGPT, they asked ChatGPT how to do something. ChatGPT hallucinated a URL to my website. But they recommended my software to this person. So this person went to my website, got a broken page. The web page says, this page does not exist, man. And he's panicking now because ChatGPT told him to do something that he can't do. He can't follow on the screen. So then he's contacting me to say, well, your website is broken. It doesn't work. As a result of this and a dozen other emails, I've actually built some decent intelligence into the 404 page of my website, which tries to guess what the people are trying to do when they come to the website and see a broken page and leads them there. So that's my washing machine moment. And but I think this is something that if it's happening to me, it's happening to all my competitors as well. And there's a huge number of potential customers that we are all getting through hallucinated shit. And then one question is, are we just telling them, oh, go away? Or are we helping them do the job that they're supposed to do? So, and again, this is not really the only case. Throughout my career, I've had lots and lots of cases like this on a smaller scale because ChatGPT really automated things. But let's see kind of how many people in the room had similar experiences. Who had a situation where you thought, well, the user is really too stupid to use your product? Be honest. Yeah. Half of the room. Half of the room, really. So it's not unusual. There's some research, Scott Alexander published this research on his blog, Starslate Codex. I really love his ideas and I love his writing, and he wrote about this, the demographical survey they've done. It was a combination of demographics and kind of some sociological studies where they've tried to qualify people, what their ethnicity is, nationality, and things like that, and then kind of some conclusions try to compare that. And what they realized is that there's a certain number of people that just like put idiotic answers there that you cannot explain. So a couple of people selected American as gender, or entered American as gender. And okay, like gender politics are difficult now, maybe that's something that, but then some people selected Martian as an ethnicity. And then kind of, what their conclusion is is that there will be a number of people that are maybe confused when they use your software. They don't know what you're trying to do. They are maybe working with fat fingers on a small screen like I'm doing, so even though they wanted to kind of select the right thing, they select the wrong thing. Some people will have no mental capacity to understand what you're doing. Some people will be distracted, although they have mental capacity. They will temporarily be distracted from it and things like that. And then he pulled out this number called 4%. And he called it the lizardman's constant. And he said, you have 4% lizardmen in your population of users. Those are people who do unexplainable things because they follow their own logic. And he based this on kind of some research, again, where 4% of people believe that lizard men are ruling America or something like that. And kind of, although this number is a joke number, of course it's a joke number, I think it's kind of quite an interesting thing to think about. Like, it's not 0%, is it? And some percent of the users do weird things. And then we can figure out why they're doing these weird things and figure out what to do about that. And should we do anything about that? Because if we start looking at interactions over kind of just following a plan, then these people have weird interactions. So let's kind of see the opposite. Who in the room has said this situation? Like, the user is too smart to use your software. Oh, 1, 2. Okay, no, not a lot, 4 or 5. That's interesting. So this is it's an equally interesting situation to be in. For example, about 20 years ago, I worked on an integration between a UK bookmaker, a gambling company, and a US poker network. So the US poker network uses dollars, the UK gambling company uses pounds. No wonder about that. And in the poker network, dollar cents were chips. So you'd convert pounds into chips, which were dollar cents, send kind of chips back, which were dollar cents. So we had this weird situation where at that point, and it's coming to this kind of actually around again, a pound was $0.54, a dollar was $0.54 pounds. So what we had kind of, after we deployed the software, we released it, it was tested, it was approved, it was accepted, it was live for about a month, and then somebody took one chip that was $0.01, converted it into pounds, and ended up with 1 penny, and then took that 1 penny, sent it back to dollar chips, and ended up with 2 chips, or 2 cents. And this is how inflation works. So that's why computers cause inflation. So, when this thing happened, of course, he didn't stop there. He wrote a robot that automated this, and over 2 days, he accumulated about 20,000 pounds. And he withdrew the money because the person's done nothing wrong. The bookmaker had to give him the money, but then everybody started screaming at everybody. The customer screamed at the customer representative screamed at the business analyst screamed at the product owner screamed at the testers were screaming at developers, everybody was screaming at everybody else. And this is the point where like a really funny thing started happening because the customer was complaining that we need to give them kind of the company needs to kind of pay them back for damages. It was really weird, and the project manager basically claimed that everything is okay because, like, we've done what you wanted us to do. Like, this was your spec, this was in the contract, and then we started arguing, or they started arguing whether this is a bug or a feature request to kind of fix. So, and I originally was kind of under the fire there because I labeled it as a bug. And then a project manager, I worked with this project manager, wonderful, wonderful person. I don't know if you worked with somebody like that. It's like after you quit your job and you see that person on the other side of the street, you just turn away and run. And so the project manager sat me and my colleague down and said, you are labeling too many things as bugs. He says, well, what does that mean? I mean, we have too many bugs. That's like, it's not my fault I'm labeling them, it's the fault of kind of people putting bugs in. She said, no. And she explained this really, really nicely. I like this definition. She said, kind of, the only difference between a bug and a feature is who pays for it. So from now on, everything is a feature request. And we're getting into this philosophical discussion now. It's idiotic, but that's what it is. So there's this kind of concept that we have of bugs being wrong and features being right. But then what is wrong, what is right? I mean, then we get into what Christian morality and perspectives of St. Augustine and who knows. So let's not do this. One of the kind of things that really opened my thinking about this was about 10 years ago, one of the products I built was a collaboration tool. And this is already where we had zero distance to customer because it was just me and a colleague building and supporting a tool. And this collaboration tool, we had a bug report one day that it doesn't work on a Samsung fridge. It's like, well, what? And this was before Haier and washing machines and everything. It's like, I've never really intended for this to work on a fridge. Well, what do you mean doesn't work on a fridge? How are you? And I was thinking like, this is, my imagination was, why would you use this software in a fridge? Like there's juice and you're going to ruin a computer. What is there? I mean, it's, I guess if you're trying to keep your opinions fresh or something like that, it makes sense. But so we started talking to this person, and she was a busy mom. This was before COVID, before work from home. And people were using our software to collaborate in planning meetings. And she was there in the morning preparing breakfast for her kids. While doing that, she wasn't able to really fully participate in a meeting, but she wanted to observe what's going on. And having a laptop on a table where she's running around the room is not good. Having it on a small screen, again, not really visible. She had this massive screen on a newly bought Samsung fridge that ran Android. She could launch a web browser on it. And she tried to do that because she can see that from the whole kitchen. And we're thinking like, well, I mean, it's not actually a bad use case. It's not something we've predicted, but it's not a bad use case. So maybe we should think about supporting that. But there's like a ton of problems where the fridge doesn't have a keyboard. The fridge doesn't have a mouse. I mean, if your fridge has mice, you have much bigger problems than the software not working. But and we tried to figure out how do we change the UX of the software to work without a keyboard and a mouse. And then we made it actually a lot better for a whole class of people. And then when COVID hit, the usage just exploded because it was actually kind of built for that. So I think we need to move away as conceptually thinking about bugs and features as right or wrong. We can think about them as expected or unexpected. And that moves away from the whole kind of morality problem. As we can then think about, well, if we're thinking about expected and unexpected, who's expecting this? I certainly wasn't expecting any of my users to kind of try to launch the software in a fridge. But the user was expecting that the software works there. The farmers were expecting that the washing machine can wash potatoes. People who are building washing machines never thought of that. So we can use this as kind of a feedback cycle and figure out this kind of unexpected thing. And that's why I think we can start mixing all sorts of different things that we now have as technical capabilities in software. For example, exception tracking, all sorts of kind of production analytics and things like that. We have that data, we're collecting that data. If you're running stuff on the cloud, you probably have 100 machines running somewhere virtually, dying, starting up. When they do something not expected, you get alerts. We've built tools for that. We're not applying these tools for user interactions, and we should. So, when we look at what's expected, what's unexpected, I think there's two important perspectives here. And again, going back to the whole idea of team and customer, I'm going to kind of put everybody who's delivering a product in one group. It doesn't matter how many proxy levels there are. And I'm going to put people who are using the product or purchasing the product in another group. So we have, does it do what the users expected? Does it do what the makers expected? So if it does what the kind of users expected and makers expected, that's acceptable. That's a feature. If it doesn't do what you expect and doesn't do what your users expect, that's a bug. That's, we can try to smuggle it as a feature request in a contract. It's irrelevant, but it's a bug. But there's these two other categories that are really interesting. So, and I think that's where a lot of opportunities lie. So the first one is if it does something that you think is good, but it's not what the users expect to do. And Kat Holmes, who is a UX designer, she used to work at Microsoft, talks about this category as a mismatch There's a mismatch between the user's capabilities or the user's intent and the software. It doesn't mean that the software was wrong as built, but there's a mismatch between what the users are actually wanting to do. So the mismatch might be due to their motoric capabilities, due to their current situation. Somebody's out there in the bright sunlight of Cornwall trying to use a software without enough contrast. There's a mismatch. We have not expected that. And the other one kind of here is the exploit. That's kind of somebody using your software in ways you didn't think it was possible or you didn't think it was kind of intended, but they're actually getting value from it because they expected it. Now, hacking comes into this category, obviously, but there's a lot of other stuff that comes into this category that's really interesting. For example, in 1999, there was this company in San Francisco. They started with this brilliant idea of building a really efficient cryptographic library because, like 1999, software people start with the product. They don't start with the customer. So I can build this, and they built it. So they built this really efficient cryptographic library for encrypting things. And because it was really efficient, then they said, well, you know, it's incredibly optimized. We can run it on low-power devices now. Okay, so what do we do with that? Well, we can do cryptography on I don't know, mobile devices in 1999. Okay, what do we do with that? Well, you know, like cryptography is used to protect important things. So what do you want to protect on a mobile device in 1999? I mean, it's money. Money is important. And then they had this idea where, I mean, 1999, iPhone wasn't there, Android wasn't there, Palm Pilot was the shit. So they had this idea where Steve is going to have his Palm Pilot, I'm going to have my Palm Pilot, and we're going to bang them together. And when we bang them together, money is magically going to hop from one device to another. And we're going to use that for payments between Palm Pilot devices. It's going to be amazing. And they built this, of course, because you can build almost anything you can think about. And they built this, and then they realized kind of people need to be close together to bang shit. And it's not easy to be close together to bang shit. So they built this kind of website for testing things. The website was officially, according to the book by Jessica Livingston, Founders at Work is the book by Jessica Livingston. The website was officially unsexy because it was used for testing. It was used for testing. Nobody cared about the website. They just deployed it. They put it there so they can kind of experiment with these things easier. And then all of a sudden, what started happening is people started using the website and not the Palm Pilot devices to transfer money. And the product management fought against that for about a year. They tried to go after people who were publishing the links to kind of take them down. They were threatening to sue people. And then a year later, somebody added up the numbers. There were 12,000 downloads of the Palm Pilot app in total. There were 1.5 million people actively transferring money over the website. And then they made the smart decision to stop fighting it, kill the Palm Pilot app, and focus on the website. And today you know them as PayPal. So kind of exploits are incredibly, incredibly important as signals to kind of act on. And what I'm trying to say is basically moving away from the idea of bugs and features, moving away from the idea of right and wrong, but moving into kind of this idea of we have exploits, we have mismatches, that's kind of a lot of gray area, is important because mismatches and exploits are hidden product opportunities. There's a lot of stuff that can be discovered if we start looking for mismatches and exploits. And a lot of this stuff becomes really, really important for us to actually kind of keep our users engaged. Because when somebody's exploiting your software, when somebody has a mismatch with your software, they're there, they're using your software. That's the kind of important thing. So Amy Gallo did this kind of research she published in the Harvard Business Magazine. She says that improving retention by 5% has a kind of outsized effect on your revenue and profit. You can get 95% more profit by increasing retention by 5%, by keeping people who are there. Now, if you look at kind of, really there's two ways of growing a product. One way of growing a product is to get new customers, new users. The other way of growing a product is to keep people who are already using your product for longer. The first part is where marketing and sales comes in. I'm really bad at that. Most people in this room are really bad at that. The second part is what the product does itself. If somebody's already interacting with your product, The marketing, the acquisition part for that user is done. The product can keep them there or it can disappoint them. When somebody comes with a hallucinated URL to your website, you can either reject them, confuse them, or you can lead them to what they need to do. And that's where kind of all these hidden product opportunities are. And I think one of the kind of really interesting things that came out of this kind of product I was building last couple of years was originally it was intended for people to create videos from PowerPoints. So you would upload a PowerPoint, you would type what you want the narration to be in the presenter notes, and it would use text-to-speech to create a video and sync all of it. Users were HR departments at companies, internal training departments, and things like that. And in order to help these people kind of work better, we iterated a lot over the whole kind of text-to-speech configuration thing. So you can do that very easily. And then we had this one guy who was complaining that some configuration didn't work. I loaded his PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint was completely blank. I was like, oh shit, there's a bug here. And now people use lots of weird tools like Google Slides or Keynote or open source tools to create PowerPoints. Maybe we're not importing that correctly. So I kind of started talking to this person, asked, well, what have you used to create this PowerPoint? And he said, well, Office 365. And I was like, ooh, that's a problem. And I looked at tried to figure out how we are not converting this PowerPoint correctly, couldn't figure it out. And then I asked this person, like, if you load this PowerPoint in your Office 365, can you send me a screenshot? And he sent me a screenshot, it was a blank slide. It was a single blank slide. It's like, okay, this is like this potato thing now. I said, why are you uploading a blank PowerPoint, man? I said, well, it's not a blank PowerPoint. There's kind of the presenter notes there. So we've iterated over the text-to-speech thing so much that it was worth for this person to create a blank PowerPoint, upload the PowerPoint with the text-to-speech conversion, create a blank video just to extract the audio track to use it somewhere else. I said, well, okay, thank you, first of all. This is, unexpected, but why? I said, well, I don't need a video. I need an audio track, and this is easy to use. And first of all, creating a video, the infrastructure for that is much more expensive than creating an audio file. It takes a longer time. We're putting all these obstacles in front of this person to create a PowerPoint. And to save money, I kind of just created a small interface where you can type in text and get an audio. I mean, it wasn't the primary use of the tool, but it saves you money. And next month, there were equally as many audio files built as there were videos. The month after that, there were twice as many audio files built as there was videos. And about 5 months later, the situation was this. We had like 500 times more audio files than video files being built on the platform. So the product went completely in the other direction. And it grew 500 times because we noticed this exploit. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say when I say, it's the product can keep these people or it can kind of send them away. And it's up to us to do that. So kind of step number one really here needs to be that we need to kind of learn how people are misusing our products. And when we learn how people are misusing our products, we can then figure out, is it an exploit, is it a mismatch? Do we use it as a signal for product stuff? And this is what zero distance to customer or smaller distance to customer means. There's a lovely video by Rachel Newman, who worked for Eventbrite in Australia. She talks about how customer service personnel, support people, call center people, they have an incredibly valuable trove of knowledge, how people are struggling with software. And then it gets filtered, it gets consolidated, it gets filtered, and then somebody comes up with some kind of feature idea at the end. This is too slow, this is too wrong. We can start kind of closing that feedback cycle, we can start closing that loop if we can learn better how people are misusing our product. And again, technically we have tools for this, we're just not using them for product stuff, we're using them for technical things. For example, I built this screen I mentioned where you can upload the file, it can be a Word document, a PDF document, or something like that. And it will then convert it to audio, but if you upload something that's not supported, it gives you a nice error message, of course. It says, you've uploaded a PNG file. It's not a text document, it's a PNG file. And then, kind of normally, this is where most software stops. We tell the user, you've done something wrong, do it again. try to explain what's wrong. But I also have, like, this is the magic trick. Just log this. Just send it back to you. Log situations where users end up in a dead end, send it back to yourself so you can analyze it. So I started logging this stuff, and there's like more than 100 people per day that are uploading Android package files into text-to-speech system. Android package files are Android applications. Why somebody would upload an Android application to a text-to-speech, I have no idea. My best explanation for this is that this is kind of the equivalent of leaving a USB key outside of a company or leaving a CD full with viruses outside of a company 20 years ago, hoping that somebody's going to load this. They're hoping that I'm going to be curious enough to say, well, I'll buy an Android phone and install your kind of APK just to see what you're trying to do text-to-speech. So these people, like, we can't do anything about them, but there were kind of a couple of people per day that were trying to upload SRT files that I was not expecting. SRT files are subtitle files for videos. The text related to an audio, it's a text file. Why just not, I'll whitelist that extension? That's fine. So I whitelisted that extension, and then the one person that was trying to upload it got in touch immediately next day and says, oh, this is all wrong. It read my timestamps. I said, well, a subtitle file has timestamps in text. You uploaded a file that has timestamps in text. It read the timestamps. What do you expect? I said, well, I expected it to synchronize the audio with the timestamps. I said, oh, that's interesting. I've not really thought about that. It was an interesting technical challenge to do. There's a bunch of things you need to do to speed up audio without distorting a pitch and things like that. And I spent 2 hours on it. I've done it. And I've released it just for fun. There's like one person a day doing it. It's not going to be a big impact. This thing, those 2 hours of work are by far the most profitable thing I have done in my life. It's about a month later, a huge enterprise software company realized that what they can do is they have 200,000 videos for training for their software. They're in English, they have subtitle files, they can do AI translation of a subtitle file to a different language, and then they can just upload the translated subtitle file, get a synchronized audio track. Something that used to take hours and hours and hours of work to have a translated audio track now takes 2 minutes. There are churches that are doing like mega kind of preaching across the world where they are using this thing to translate their sermons now. Absolutely by far the most profitable thing I've done in my life, these 2 hours of work. And they came as a result of like noticing a mismatch or an exploit. So kind of the next step kind of really is the problem when you start logging this stuff. And this is where, again, our technical tools can help. There's a lot of noise. There's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be a lot of stuff nobody can act on. There's going to be confusing things. So kind of the next step is to zoom in or to focus on one specific behavior change you want to improve. Don't try to improve everything all over the place because you're not going to be able to do that. And this is, again, where anomaly detection can help. All these sorts of kind of logging tools and alerting tools can help us figure out what's worth focusing on. One of the things I started noticing when I started logging stuff is that with the audio thing, 8% of people, something like 2%, were creating blank audio files, zero-length audio files. And I thought, well, this is even weirder. It's not even blank videos where you have some value in it. There's no value in this. And it turns out that people were uploading text that could not be read by a voice to something. So, for example, they would use an English language voice and upload Chinese text. An English language voice wasn't trained to read Chinese text, zero-length audio. And I was paying for this because I was paying for the infrastructure to process it. Users were not paying me for that. So I kind of did the same thing as before. Like, if I detect that the voice completely cannot read anything here, I would alert people up front and I would log it. So this is kind of, you can see what people are doing. So somebody tried to use Cyrillic with a voice called Charles, an English language voice, Hindi with a robo voice, again, some kind of Hindi with Charles. And there's like Hindi here that becomes important later for a story, remember that. But I was just kind of showing people an error message and logging it so I can figure out what's going on. And when I started doing this, the next day I got one of the best emails ever. I got an email from a Canadian guy who said basically he paid to use a Canadian voice, and the software told him that he needs to put Latin in. And he's going to be complaining to the Canadian consulate in Britain. I'm sure that the Canadian consulate is going to be really impressed with his complaint. And it's a diplomatic incident now. I need to figure out what's going on. And this wasn't saying you need Latin language. It says you need Latin letters, man. It's like Latin alphabet. But he misunderstood the message. So the message was wrong. There was a mismatch between this person's cognitive ability and my message. And I kind of tried to figure out, well, why show people an error message at all? Why not kind of figure out what's going on in a better way? And I loaded his text, and his text was 100 equal signs. Lizard. So anyway, so Katy Sierra has this book called Badass on how to get your users awesome. And she talks about this thing where she calls it the suck zone. The suck zone is the first 30 minutes of interaction with your software, where most people do not have enough experience to use your software well, or your product well. And she said, kind of people first, they experience like, I hate this thing because I can't use it. I can't even do the basics. And then there's kind of, over the suck zone is, I can do the basics. I've done one thing useful, so I know this thing at least works. And she said kind of the job of the product people is to get people over this kind of suck zone hurdle as soon as possible. She talks about 30 minutes of tolerance for people to get out of the suck zone. If they can't get over the suck zone in 30 minutes, they're not going to use your product anymore. The product-led community talks about this for about kind of 4 to 5 minutes. I got it down to 30 seconds for my thing, and I'm really impressed by that. And what I've kind of thought about is kind of, we need to get people over the suck zone, and we need to kind of remove the obstacles we're putting in front of users. So the fact that I was requiring people to have a PowerPoint to create an audio was an obstacle. I put it there by mistake. The fact that kind of the software is not explaining well what's consumable, what's not consumable is, there's sometimes you can't do anything about technology. This AI voice is not trained to read Hindi, but we can lead people somewhere. So my idea basically was, okay, if the voice can't read this, I'm going to give them a different choice, and I'm going to pre-select. I'm going to say, well, this is Bangla. Charles can't read it, but here's 10 voices that can. And here's a blue button, just kind of, if you don't worry about reading, just click here, you'll get a good result. And out of that, kind of, people started interacting with the software a lot more. I was keeping these lizards on the system. So the kind of interesting thing is really, if you think something's working, don't trust your gut. You have to measure it. Ron Kohavi has this wonderful book that came out about 2 years ago called Trustworthy Online Controlled Experiments. And this is kind of online experimentation community emerged from this idea that we need to validate really that the ideas make sense. Ron became famous in 2009 where he followed some people at Microsoft that were promising grand benefits in PowerPoints before feature ideas, and then followed up on whether these ideas actually delivered the value they were supposed to deliver. And he published this book in online controlled experimentation. He published the research in online controlled experimentation Microsoft, and then people started sending him other data for the book. So his data from Microsoft in 2009 is that about 1/3 of ideas actually delivered the value they were supposed to deliver. 1/3 have no statistically relevant impact on the user behavior, and 1/3 actually damage the user behavior they were supposed to improve. And he says that kind of for well-optimized domains, the numbers could be even worse. At Bing, they noticed that only about 10 to 20% ideas improve user behaviors or customer value because it's already optimized. It's already a working product. At Google, it's about 10 to 20%. At Slack, it's 30%. Netflix early on, they have data that's kind of around 10%. So here's what I want you to think about. How many features have you deployed to production last year? Out of those features, how many are likely to have actually delivered value? And it's not going to be 100%. Even if you're not measuring, it's not going to be 100%. You have no crystal ball to predict this. You're very likely to be somewhere in this range. And how many features have you removed from your software after it was deployed to production last year? 0 for most people. Why are we keeping stuff there that's delivering no value, making users making the software more difficult for users to use, costing more to test, costing more to operate. Why? Because we're kind of not tracking it. So metrics, dashboards, again, we have tools for this. And I started tracking kind of the user interactions after kind of I deployed this change for Hindi languages and things like that. That was my first attempt. And you can see at this point, it was like 100,000 tasks per day on average. It jumped to about 200,000 tasks per day, just from that small change. Double. We were leading people to kind of implement something faster. And one more thing that's kind of really interesting, Ron Kohavi talks about this in a book. It's called Twyman's Law. If you have a number that looks very different from the previous number, it's probably wrong. There's something wrong here. I mean, it would be amazing if it's right, but there's something wrong here. So I started digging into this. And one of the things that's important when we're doing these experiments is not to just look at one thing and pop up champagne, when you double the usage. It's kind of to actually implement guardrail metrics as well. Ron Kohavi talks about this in his book. We need to set both targets and we need to set guardrail metrics, something that tells us we are still in the right lane. This car is not going like 500 miles an hour, but in a different direction. And a model that is really useful, I like using it for this, is called the stages of growth from a book called Lean Analytics. It talks about the 5 typical stages, how a product progresses through growth. There's a lot of material about this, and it's not the kind of point of this talk. Read into this in the book called Lean Analytics. But one of the things you can do with this is that you say, well, what we're trying to do is increase stickiness. That's going to be one of our target metrics. How many tasks per day are people using? But I don't want to damage revenue too much. I don't want to damage scale. I want to keep being able to operate at scale. And I had metrics around revenue here. And the metrics around revenue were really bad. Most people kind of here were just kind of using the software to the free limit as they could and never really upgrading. And if it continues like this, the company would go bust in like a month. So what I did is I looked at this and I realized, well, yes, I've changed it for Hindi languages, and all of a sudden, all these kind of free users, they're all coming from India. Something's wrong there. I don't know what's wrong, but it's on fire because I'll go bankrupt. It's my company, it's my money. So I did something really, really stupid, and I kind of blocked India completely until I figured out what's going on. And I knew that it's going to piss off some people, but it gives me a breather. It gives me some time to kind of relax. So as a result of that, what happened is the usage did this. From 200,000 tasks per day, it jumped to 500 tasks per day. It doubled again. I was like, this makes no sense at all. I've blocked India, and now it's doubled. And I started looking at this, and users from Czech Republic were generating Hindi language audio. Users from Iceland were generating Hindi language audio. Users from Nigeria were generating Hindi language audio. It's like, okay. And I started kind of trying to figure out what's going on, and it turns out that somebody published a YouTube video, how to abuse my system, using VPNs. And I found that it was a popular video. It was like Hindi, and this is VPN. It's like, okay, VPNs. So my next attempt was basically just block VPNs. If you're accessing over a VPN, you get this message. And it kind of solved the problem. It went down like this. It went down more than kind of the usage was. So I blocked some genuine users as well, unfortunately. And one of the really interesting things that started happening is I started getting about 1,000 emails a day. Zero distance to customers, you start getting weird emails. I got an email from an insurance company in India where basically they said they've been using my software for 3 years and it's critical to their business and they can't access anymore. One of the weirdest emails I got is from a guy claiming that he cannot use a normal internet connection because he's too spiritual. And he's harassed by the policemen or military who monitor his internet. And one of the really interesting things there is kind of step number 4 is to detect unintended impacts of what we're doing. Again, anomaly detection tools can help us with this. And I got, I started getting 10 emails per day like this. Just please restore my access from a bounced email, like from an anonymized email. Outlook for Windows, no body, nothing, just kind of, but same pattern. Just please restore my access, nobody. And this is a kind of anonymous email. You can't even reply to it. Day 10, I got an email from a Gmail account like this, and I said, okay, now I have you. I can talk to you. Like, who are you? What's going on? And I explained that kind of basically I can't afford VPNs because, you know, the people are abusing it. He said, that's fine, but give me my money back. And I looked at his account, and this person paid me $500 to use the system. He was a decent customer, and he's being blocked. And I'm like, well, this is not a case I should be blocking. This is a genuine use case. I mean, this person is a commercial user. They want to use a VPN for whatever reason. I shouldn't be blocking that. Like the spiritual guy, probably yes. And I thought, well, you know, how do we solve this? Now, one easy way, very, very easy way people would do this, and I used to do this a lot, is like take this person's IP address, whitelist it on the firewall, and that's it. But that would solve a problem for that one person. Kat Holmes, in her book Mismatch, talks about a different strategy. She says, when you solve these problems, you need to solve for one but extend to many. We need to figure out not a solution for this one person that does software on a fridge, on this specific fridge. We need to figure out how do we solve this for a whole category of users who don't have a keyboard and a mouse. We need to solve this for not just one person who kind of, you know, wants to use the software, but for a whole category of these people. And I thought, well, there's no reason not to let commercial users use a VPN. I don't care, let them. So I built a detection check where basically it says if you're coming from a VPN and you're a commercial user, just go through, that's fine. If not, well, I let you pay. It says, you know, this is only for commercial users, pay, upgrade. And I ended February that year with a 25% increase in revenue, which is, again, one of the most profitable things I've done in my life. So what I'm trying to say is kind of when we're looking at this, when we're monitoring abuse, when we're monitoring exploits, when we're monitoring mismatches, and we go through this process to actually solve the problem and extend it to many users. We retain people, we can increase product growth, we can make better products genuinely. Of course, you're never ever going to be kind of satisfying everybody. So even when you know I've done this, the spiritual user came back with the best email I have, and I'm keeping this, and I'm showing it at all my slides now. So you're not going to save every lizard, but if you save some percentage of lizards, you will increase your product usage quite a lot. And as developers, as product people, you can influence that, and we can use all these tools that we have, like observability, anomaly detection, AI detection, and things like that, and create maybe not zero distance to customer, but closer distance to customer. So basically, to summarize things off, there's 4 steps I've talked about. One is to learn how people are misusing the product. The other is to zoom in on one behavior change at a time. The third is to remove obstacles that we've put in front of users there. And fourth is really to detect unintended impacts, because there will be lots of unintended impacts. If you can't remember this long, I have a shorter version of this. It's called Lizard Alert, Zoom in, Rescue Them, and Double Check. The initial letters are RZRD. It's kind of lizard optimization because of that. There's a book I wrote about this as a small present for enduring an hour of this talk. I'll give you the ebook for free. You can download it for the next 10 days from this URL. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gojko.